Hello, everyone, and welcome to Noor Riyadh, a Riyadh art program. I am delighted to be joining you today. My name is Fatoon Al-Daidi, and I am the Content Development Manager at Noor Riyadh. Noor Riyadh is an annual festival of light and art located in the city of Riyadh. It's the first of its kind. It's an incredible festival that celebrates the unity of international and local artists across the city of Riyadh. And this year's theme is Under One Sky. It's a quite exciting theme to really discuss throughout these times. And I'm really delighted to be welcoming you today to our panel, a part of Noor Talks. Our panel today is called You Say Light, I Think Shadow, and I'm joined today by Ingrid, who's a scientist and a researcher, as well as Aleksandra, who's an artist, and she's a part of Noor Riyadh 2021. And I would like to welcome our incredible guests to the panel today. I'm quite excited to have a chat with you and also exchange these incredible collaborations with both of you, as today's panel really highlights science and art and the public perception and how we really are engaging, the communities and the public within these topics and how they interconnect. So to start off, I'm going to introduce our first guest, Ingrid. As I mentioned, Ingrid is a scientist, is a researcher and an engineer who works within the field of architecture, environment, and construction engineering. And I'm delighted to introduce her today. And she's going to take us through her work, and we're really excited to hear from her. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. I will start with my presentation.
Input minus output plus consumption equals accumulation.
Exciting!
Because accumulation mainly means three things: waste, heritage, and knowledge. So the idea of the group is working mainly on this aspect of the material balance equation.
I think from the different perspective, we can try to make not maybe radical changes, but these small changes that really goes in the direction of modifying the built environment. So it could be maybe more comfortable space where people doesn't feel noise, for example. You deal with acoustic when it's too late, when you have a problem, no? Or you deal with new materials when you realize something is going wrong. So we try to anticipate.
Okay, so this was a short video introduction to also give a feeling of the title, that is Balancing Matter and Light, Blurring Borders, because our research group is working on this idea of what is matter, how can we employ them in architecture, in design, and also what is the impact of light, of the environment, of all the performances on people mainly. So never forgetting that we put the human in the center and that we are in this planet also for what concerns sustainability and the resources. So let's start with the next. So these are for us the big challenges in our sector: climate change, so to reduce the CO2 emission, the scarcity of resources, so to be very careful in which type of matter we use when we imagine to work in our built environment. And the third challenge we try to tackle is urban health. So how can we live in our environment being respectable of what and where we are and which type of context we're working on. And together, to couple with the challenges, we have some very important tools today that I think we shouldn't look at something different from us. We made these tools as humans to try to build a better environment and to live better, that are advanced manufacturing techniques with which we can really tailor and manufacture the construction system and the materials we are using. Computational design, that is a way to design with informatics, that today it's becoming really a very important tool for designers, architects, but also in different other fields. It's very important to be able to imagine the geometry of objects, of spaces, of products before they are built. And finally, that is what you will probably see in the case studies I will show you from our research group, materials on demand. So the possibility to really customize every single material thanks to the advancements in material science. So I will show you 4 experiments we have done throughout our lab in Politecnico di Milano University. And we always try to work in the borders between material science, design, environment, and what is the final aim of our architecture. The first example will be the use of sand waste for an experimental material system. And this was done nearby in Dubai. So the client was Expo 2020 in an experimental tender to design a shading for light that could have been produced with additive manufacturing, so with an innovative technique, designed with computational design, and using also waste from the construction site. The inspiration came from the landscape, of course, and the techniques that comes in architecture from the Gulf countries, so the dunes of the desert and the strongness of light that needs to be shaded, like similar to Mashrabiyya, or elements that we use a lot in architecture in this type of context, because it's very important. Light is as important as it's important to filter it. We imagine to work with an external shading of these small pavilions that could remind the idea of the dune of the desert in terms of geometry, and that could work also with the materials that could be based also in the local. So we tried next one. We tried to work with different types of mixture. We are very much similar sometimes to chemistry or to alchemists, and how we call us alchemists of matter, because we try to put together existing materials with waste sometimes just to understand which type of waste we have in construction. It's a very big issue. And always looking at how much we deploy our ground, our environment from important resources. In that case, we studied different alternatives, and at the very end, we designed a compound of PLA, that is a bio-based material, together with sands from Dubai coming from the waste of the construction site. So the idea has been to use what is usually a discard from a process and to reimagine it in the construction process. We made pellets from this material, so small balls that goes in the 3D printer, so that you can reshape matter as you wish. So the fabrication was made thanks to a very lightweight structure that you can see here. It's a metal structure that goes outside to the building. So it's really a shading that can help to filter the light, but also outside to be recognizable. So when you go near to this pavilion, that if they will be built in the future, because it was a tender, you could see with this movement of the shading, you can remind that which type of place it is, and also that they have completely different colors. Here is how they are assembled. So there is this metal structure where you can really hang each component. And so if we have kept a vertical standard measure, we are completely free in the horizontal one. Here you can see the optimization that we have done thanks to computational tool. So it has been very useful to understand how much matter to put in our design of the shading. And so what's the weight, what are the properties, how much light is coming inside, and also how much waste sand we could use to design the outdoor shading. This is the panel subdivision. This is very typical from our sector. So usually we start from a concept. We try to make some prototype in the material, and then we go through a sort of optimization when that would be possible to produce every single panel. And as you can see, one of the advantages of 3D printing is that every piece can be different. So we can really use what we call mass customization. So it's the idea that you can customize, but also at a lower cost. So it's not a one single piece, but it's more changing the shape that could have different forms and performances. This is the printer. So you can see it's a quite big printer. It's not the desktop printer we usually have for design, for example. So it's quite big. It's 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. So we printed exactly what we would like to have on site. And this is quite innovative too. It's a new way of dealing with experimental technologies, not making a prototype and then making another material system with some other materials. It's really experimenting what will be on site so that it could be locally produced. This is the mock-up we made, and on the bottom you can see the example of the lamella, so to see how could be the final result. And this is a render of how it could be. So the idea that you can play with the light, play with this wavy shape, and at the same time have this materiality that could remind the sand and the dune sands. So putting together these different issues also from the very beginning, that I think is quite important, thinking of which resources you're using, how with design you can design the geometry and imagine at the final result of your project. So you can see here some mock-ups. These are in Expo. And in the next one, I think we can see from very near here, you can see the lines of the sand. So we printed it first in vertical, then we move it to horizontal, but we thought it would be very important to design every single detail of the component. This is another type of material we have used. It's thinking of traditional technique, but reusing them for contemporary architecture. So the tradition of weaving is a very old one, and what it makes, it allows to give strength to natural materials that are very flexible, that can be bended, but that alone could not have enough strength. So what we made, we started from the very traditional technique, we put them in computational design, and with that we imagine what could be the strength of a natural material and how we could imagine to make a shading. So here too, playing with light somehow and with its properties and imagining a new material system. This is rattan, so it's a very common material for outdoor structure and it's natural. And what we have done is to see it at the microscope, because understanding how exactly a material is in its inner properties, it's very useful for us because we can then simulate how it will behave. So in that case, it's very porous. So this means it will absorb heat, it will absorb water, it will be, somehow it will be alive. So also it's very interesting for us to always work in the boundaries. That was also the title of the presentation, between natural and artificial. Or what is natural, what is artificial in our design? Maybe these boundaries are blurring somehow. So we tried to design which type of curves we could have with this rattan, and we made some examples that could be simulated from a computational point of view, and we also made it physically. So the idea was, let's try to make experiments with the material and at the same time with its computational properties. And here is the result. So it's a very big infrastructure, structure. For us, we call them architectural prototypes, a sort of demo where we show potentialities. Then we never know exactly what we will do with it, but it's more, let's push the boundaries and imagine to reinterpret an antique technologies with innovative tools so that you can make a real new system. And here you can see in that case too, so the weaving is composed by this computationally designed structure, where there's a very important role of light, because light becomes a part of the project. It's not something that comes out at the very end, but it's something we really try to understand from the very beginning, also simulating it. So we really try to understand what will be the negative and the positive of using our materials. Okay, so another important material we are working on also in this idea of natural materials and working with performance is sound. Sound, as you see in the video, you think when it's too late, no? But it's not only, sound is not only a physical performance, but it's also a very important behavioral performance. So as you have seen in the wheel before, it's also a psychological performance. So because, for example, for someone, a small noise could be very annoying, and for someone else, it could be nothing. So what noise did you hear? So it's so difficult to tailor this performance that we try to make these panels that are flexible, that change it in space and can make these effects working with light too, with natural materials, so that you can really have the effect of tailoring the performance while you design them. So you could have a different effect in the sound perception and in the same time of the light going on the material. So I think there's two more. One is with textiles, and the last one will be more with natural materials. With textiles, here too, we start with a traditional technique that we also try by hand, and I assure you it's very difficult to knit, because knitting, here too, we can really tailor the performance of every yarn. And I think that for us, this is a very big advantage of working with very different, as you can see, material systems, because we try to push the boundaries and imagine how this material could react with the environment. It could work with the acoustics, with the knitting, it can really shape in relation to the space. Here we made, for example, a small pavilion where there was different senses, visual, sound, resistance, climatic, pushing through hair. So the textiles is really a sort of filter that allows you to work with a lot of different performances. Always made with digital fabrication and computational tools. This means allows us to really work with innovative materials, knowing where we will try to push our design boundaries. These are some examples of the assembly. And next you can see the textiles. So in that case, for example, it was completely recycled textiles from industry, from pre-consumer materials that we tailored with the design to be acoustic, to work with light, to have different types of sensors. So reacting to the environment, that I think it's a quite important way of designing our environment today. I think this is the last one, and it's more sort of, again, working with a live system and pushing the boundaries between natural and artificial. And in that case, we work with microalgae, that is an alive bacteria that lives on Earth from a very long time and is resistant to a lot of different conditions, also very bad conditions like pollution. They live in water, and what they do a photosynthesis that is much faster than superior plants. So while superior plants do the photosynthesis thanks to their leaves, these types of water microorganisms do it thanks to their possibility to exchange between water and air. And we make this sort of enormous filter that works with light because it has to make photosynthesis. So in relation of how much light you put in the system, you will see how much this microalgae will make the photosynthesis and compensate CO2. So you're making an environment that enhances the well-being, as we have seen at the beginning. So in that case, pushing together, let's use a microorganism that is already on Earth from a long time. Let's design with computational tool and also add this possibility to have a space where you can compensate CO2 and have a very healthy environment. So the idea is always to tackle these boundaries between where do you want to live, how you want to interact with your environment, what will happen to the performances you're trying to tackle, like acoustics or light or thermal or other performances. So I think to conclude, to stay in my 10 minutes, this is a very famous picture from Hieronymus Bosch, that is the garden of Hursley. And you can see that in the middle, there's a very big mix in nature that is us. Somehow it's the most alive one. On the left, you can see like hell somehow. So it's dark and there's no nature and everyone is like going, there's a sort of decay of all sorts of habits. On the other one, paradise, but it seems like static. No, it doesn't move anymore. While in the middle, it's where life is. And there's this big mixture between humans, nature, you can see fishes, leaves, everything is coming one to another. And it really gives the idea of life, of a positive life somehow. So I decided to close with this trittico that is quite famous, because this is where I think boundaries blurs and where you can see also that light is playing a very big role in our life and also, of course, in architecture and design. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was an inspiring discussion and forward to hearing the audience has questions. Please drop them in the section for our speakers. And I have to say, what a wonderful way to conclude as well. That's a very beautiful painting, and it touched me a lot. We will move on to our next speaker, Aleksandra, who's a visual artist, and we look forward to what you will share with us. So if we can get started with that.
Hello, Riyadh. Hello, world. Fatun, thank you for introduction, and it was inspiring to see Ingrid's presentation. I'm a visual artist, and I work, or let's say I collaborate with light. So I would like to start my short presentation by taking you into the underworld. This was Underworld. It's a special installation that was created for the Light Festival Island of Light for Smögen. It's a small settlement of luminous forms that are made with the idea to depict the imaginary tiny environment from the underworld. The inspiration for this work is the environment where the Light Festival is happening. It's the west coast of Sweden. It's a beautiful nature, and it's a fisherman village that is organized in this amazing rock formations. It shows the fisherman life is still active, but also it's a very picturesque village, and it has also another kind of important qualities, like for tourism and so on. What made me really interested in this area, it's the life of these fishermen trawlers that still work actively in fishing, but in a way doing a sustainable fishing, and also taking care of the ocean bottom. They constructed different tools to clean the sea bottom of the discard and old fish nets and other stuff that is destroying life in the sea bottom. So I use these materials to create imaginary settlement, to give an idea that something exists down there, and to give a space for the audience to make this connection between the world we live and the material we use and the tools we need to survive on this planet. But what is happening with the places where we don't see? So this was the spatial installation to inspire on a sustainable way of living. This is how it was placed in Smögen on the west coast of Sweden. Then these shapes also traveled to Austria, in the forests of Austria, and they were displayed in this beautiful forest, creating a different environment in this climate. And also the video that you have seen was from the Skopje, from Macedonia, shown during the festival Skopje Light Art District. So the next project I would like to show you. It's a different kind of project. It's a different character. It's a permanent light art installation that I made for the World Heritage Grimeton radio station in Sweden. It was commissioned by the local municipality and was completed last year in February 2020. Well, I visited the Grimeton radio station for the first time in connection with this assignment and was taken by the site's industrial beauty and its ingenious history. Grimeton is an early long-wave transatlantic wireless telegraphy station built in 1924, and it was used to transmit telegram traffic by Morse code to the world. Designed by Ernst Fredrik Werner Alexandersson, a Swedish-American electrical engineer who was a pioneer in radio and television development. He invented this magnificent alternator, a radio transmitter for long-wave, long-distance radio transmission. This is still in operational condition, and each year on a day called Alexandersson Day, it started up to transmit brief Morse code transmissions. Grimeton radio station is an outstanding monument, and my first thought was to create a work that highlights the greatness of the radio station in perceptible history. I wanted to add an unexpected element, a surprise, invisible activities in poetic and inspiring way. This art installation consists of 2 laser projections mounted at a height of 127 meters on the top of one of the radio station's colossal towers. Green laser beams make the radio station's imaginary communication visible. The light movement transmits messages. Transmission speaks the same language that Grimeton radio station communicated with. The light beam, turned into words, convey messages that are based on UNESCO's work that encourages international peace, universal respect for human rights, and sustainable development. Transmissions was launched on World Radio Day, February 13th, 2020. Projection appears sporadically and are visible on the night sky over the World Heritage Grimeton station in a few miles radius. And then the third project I picked to show you, it's another kind of approach. It's a more collaboration with the materials, with the daylight, and with the architecture. It is a mobile called Sand, and I picked it here to show you because it's related to the sand, and as there is a big sand desert, Rub al Khali, I thought could be interesting to show different sand environments. So this mobile is a monumental sculpture for the new school in Aarhus in Sweden. Artwork is placed centrally in the school's atrium under the general skylight. I use this location and this beautiful space, rich with the daylight and having this fantastic communication with the weather changes, to create crystals or the particles of sand. I was inspired by the environment where Aarhus is located. It's famous for its sand dunes. So this mobile consists of the dichroic elements that are based on the quartz model, like 1 silicon atom and 2 oxygen atoms. And the elements are mounted on the flexible rods with position under the skylight. Sand is responding to light changes, to light conditions. And in that part of Sweden, light conditions are changing very quickly. Suddenly it's a very bright sun, light, or the clouds come, winds. And these dichroic elements correspond very nicely with the light angles, and also the angle where the viewer is positioned. So you see some details from the sand.
Thank you, Aleksandra. That was an incredible presentation, and I feel very inspired to witness your work, and it's wonderful to see all the environment and how much it's impacted your work. I have a question for you, because our panel is titled You Say Light, I Think Shadow, which is actually based on a book that you wrote. Yes. Can you tell us more about the book?
Yeah, it's this one book. It's it's a collaboration with my friend and great graphic designer Sandra Brown. We worked on the book for 3 years with the aim to get an answer on the question, what is light? We send a question to people that we admire, that we respect, whose work is very inspiring for us. And we collected 109 surprising and beautiful texts, poetic and personal visions, memories and descriptions about light. So on the question, what is light? We got answers about shadows, about darkness. So it's a journey. The book is a journey full of inspirational parts. And it says a lot about light and darkness. The book is done without any images. So every page, every answer on the question has its specific treatment in a way of paper we use, the color of the paper, the structure of the paper, the design. The only page that is in color, it's the yellow one. And it's about a work, very powerful, and a work of light. Yeah, the book, it's been an amazing journey for both for Sandra and me. So this is Chris Burden, the only bright yellow page in the middle of the book that tells about hazardous light. But you can find a lot of nice memories and experiences and knowledge about all kinds of different lights.
Thank you, Aleksandra. That was very beautiful. And I love that you had the book with you on hand. You're giving us a virtual experience of the book. So thank you so much for it. It was incredible.
Well, the book is also to add, it's made only in a certain number. And each book has its own number. And there are some moments that Sandra Brown and me did by hand. So it's very, very special. It's an art piece.
It is indeed. So we'll move on to the round table, and I would just like to thank both of you for the amazing presentations that you've had. And I have a question for both of you. Noor in Arabic means light. Can you recall the first time you met light within your work? And we can start with you, Aleksandra.
No, I was always like surrounded with the experience and admiration for light. Well, not the first specific situation, there is no, because I always wondered what light is and what can I do with light and what is the darkness and how to balance this too, and how to find the beauty and in both.
Thank you. We'd love to hear from you, Ingrid.
Yeah, I think it's always a sort of first time when we design different types of materials and we try them, because it's just sufficient that we put them somewhere else in the environment, we change the orientation, or we think at a different climate, and immediately the material changes. So for us, on material side, light is a sort of echo of the material. It's something that is without body, but reminds the material with which it was made. So every time we work with different techniques, natural materials or porous or more resistant or less porous, let's say, so more rugged. So every time this changes completely the light that they have. And I like to say that it's a sort of echo of matter.
Amazing. So as you both work in different disciplines, I see lots of interconnectivity because you look at environment, you look at all of these elements that impact your work in art and science. So what I would like to ask you both is, what does the connection between art and science mean to you? And we can start with you, Ingrid.
You always think, when you think at designing material or material sciencing, at something very scientific, while I think that all the beginning are quite often a serendipity process. So that's nothing scientific. It's more thinking of how you are feeling that type of material, what was your experience in that moment, how you felt when you were designing that type of component of material system. And this is, I think, art somehow, because it's the expression of yourself living in a certain period, expressing your value also. We always think that technology is neutral, but technology is absolutely not neutral, and materials are not neutral. They are the effects they take inside themselves, the effect of what we perceive, what the intention we have. So, for example, in our case, the idea that they must be sustainable and responsible towards environment. And this somehow, it takes your part of it. It's a very big part of art that then becomes something probably more scientific. But the beginning, it's always this sparkling thing that I would call art.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Aleksandra.
Yes, I agree with Ingrid that it's a lot of the same way that artists think. It's the scientists have this also need to experiment and to imagine to have a great fantasy, to imagine something, to then come to that point and prove that it is right. I know because my brother is into science. Science for me, it's important. Because I use light in my work, so that I like to understand how it works. But also what is important for me is experience of light and experience of materials. My work is usually site-specific, and that's probably because when you work with light, you work with the space, you work with the room, you work with the atmosphere, with the mood. Light is a very powerful tool. Working with light is very seldom, I think, only about light. I think mostly about the place and situation and how I would like to connect this location or this space or these people who are. And then I take my friend, my collaborator, light and darkness into that game, and then we create something that is specifically thought for the place.
Amazing. We have a question that came through from the audience, and I think it really plays well into the question that we just asked between the interconnectivity between art and science. And the question says, can science be artistic, and can arts be scientific? So it's asking if the roles can be reversed, and I think that's a quite interesting question to be asked. We can start with you, Ingrid. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think absolutely that science, it's a sort of a form of art. If with art we can think of the expression of a person in a certain period, and we can express engagement somehow, because I think what art does, it reveals somehow, maybe anticipate some feelings we have, some attention we should have. It can have a message. So I think that's the same thing that could come through science, pushing it vice versa. So what if science should anticipate everything that is around us has been imaginated first, no? Every material, every pieces. So this is also art, I think. I think there was a lot of work on art, on discarded things many years ago, even before we thought of plastic. So I think art sometimes has this capacity to understand things even before language and before we can perceive it. And this could be also, I think, a characteristic of science, to anticipate something that could come before, becoming a sort of lantern somehow to express some values or some sensations.
Yeah, I think it's important, this collaboration between art and the science, because in some situations the art can be a bridge, an opening to understand and experience some scientific researches or ideas or situations. And as Ingrid mentioned, that it's a similar kind of experimentation we do, artists and scientists. So starting with some, playing with some forms, some materials, some.
Yeah. Also, if I can add something coming from the words of Aleksandra, is that mainly also sometimes these experiments, they don't have a specific end, so it's not so linear. And this is probably similar to art. Now, you start with an idea, with a perception, you have a certain feeling that will come in a direction, and sometimes it has big U-turn or big curves. And probably this is where also art and science are similar or could collaborate in expressing this idea that nothing is very much linear, nor in science, not even in science.
I think also there are some scientists that are very open for with help of artists to illustrate this fantasy theories or worlds that they are working with, because it can you can visualize maybe with the help of artists how this that world looks like. At least with some scientists that I'm working with those ideas of exploring universe.
Yeah, there's a lot of interconnectivity, which it's fascinating to see, because we might think that they're completely different fields, but they play really well into each other. It's like there's almost a completion or a form of completion within the two. I have one more closing question to both of you, and you work in these disciplines that involve people and involve the audience. So I want to understand from your perspective, what is the importance of the audience for you within your work?
Well, for me, audience is very important, because the way I'm working, I need to share with the audience. I like to see my work as some kind of openings for others to create further on what I'm starting with. I like to share those experiences, and that's probably why I'm mostly working with the site-specific locations and works that are integrated in the public spaces. I work like with hospitals, streets, squares, schools. I find very much inspiring those different dynamic places.
In my case, I think you have probably experienced it when you enter in a place, in an heritage place, for example, in a very famous one, or in a natural heritage place, you feel this resonance with you. You feel at ease, or when you go back home, you feel that it's your place. So I think this is where the different materials and the technology are engaging with people, because for me, audience is where everyone feels at home somehow, is the habitat. And habitat comes from the Latin that is abito, that is what you dress up, because in Italian, habitat is abito. So it's where you feel comfortable, where you feel safe, where you feel that you are secure sometimes, that is, the environment is taking care of you. So I think this is where, for me, my audience is. So not to enter in a space, and it happens sometimes, when you go in some contemporary building and you don't feel at ease or you don't want to touch it. Well, I think, for example, a good sign that you feel in a good space is you start touching it. It could be marble or velvet or a sofa, and you really want to interact with the materials in which you are immersed. So this is the sign for me that the audience, my audience, if I could call it, is experience a good experience in this environment.
We have a question from the audience, and it's like the perfect question for speaking about, the inclusion of the public and the audience and how they have that experience. And their question is, what do you think about immersive art? Have you ever tried virtual reality? So I'd love to hear from both of you. Aleksandra?
Oh, yeah, I don't have much experience with that, but I did experience some projects like that. Well, yeah, why not? It is a kind of art, of course. I don't know what to say really, because we travel in different realities. We are creating different realities within art. But the virtual reality, yeah, it's another channel.
Yeah, I agree with Aleksandra. Is it not all the same environment somehow? Are we not really immersed in new tools? Maybe virtual reality, it's the edge of it. But what about augmented reality, where you mix the two reality? What about our iPhone? Are we not immersed in different environments continuously? So that is also probably a theme. I think it's part of the same environment that is changing weight from what you experience, where's your body, and what you're relationing to. So I think it's part of it. But always you have to balance, as we have said, I think, in many times today, where your experience, what's your feelings.
And I think it's also good always to give some space to the audience, to someone who is entering that world, wherever it is, if it's in reality, or if it's in a real room, or if it's in a virtual room. The opening the possibility for somebody else to create and to develop own ideas, I think it's always very important, and to get some very flat and very concrete space, because that's where you live, where you can feel at home, where you can feel that you have space and you can develop, you have future.
Well, we've unfortunately come to the end of our discussion. And I think that, it was a beautiful journey between art and science, and, how light is really connecting all of us together. And I would like to thank everyone who tuned in and joined us on the panel, and a huge and special thank you to our speakers, Ingrid and Aleksandra. Thank you for the time that you put in to join us today. And I would like to thank you all for being here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ingrid, was nice.
Yeah, very nice. Me too. Yeah.